Today I'm going to work on quite a quick little project, I hope. It's always nice to have little projects around, little plastic kits or something you can stick together in an evening without having to worry too much. So you can see progress on a layout, or just simply as a little bit of relaxation. And I've got a few of these sort of kits kicking around that I pick up at shows. And so I reached into my stash and found this one, which is the Wills Tea Kiosk. Now I think this dates from the early 1990s, and possibly looking at the state of it, this kit did as well. And what I've got is one that cost me a whole £1. Yes, the last of the big spenders, I spent a whole £1 on this kit. But I have a sneaking feeling there may be a good reason that it only cost £1. So let's have a look inside at the bits. There they are, and immediately I can see an issue, because that is most definitely somebody's had a go at that already. They've slapped some gloss green paint on it. Looks like they've painted all of the outside walls with gloss green. We've got some brown bits, those are straight off the sprue, but I have a feeling, looking at them and checking them with the packing list on the back, manufactured 1979, so it's even older than I thought. What they're missing is we're missing the wheels, so this mobile tea kiosk is not going to be very mobile. But never mind, we'll work around that one. We do appear to have most of the other bits, and for good measure we have a wall of the Wills Taximan's rank as well. So something from a kit that we weren't expecting. Okay, now you could argue I've spent £1 on this, just chuck it in the bin, Phil, because it's not worth saving. But I don't see any point in wasting money on these things. There are enough bits in here for me to make a tea kiosk, and well, a tea kiosk and part of a taximan's rank. I don't think we'll need that bit. I can chuck that to one side. But essentially, we've got all the big bits. And so I don't see why we shouldn't make a little tea kiosk. Now these things are the precursor to the traditional tea bar in a caravan that you see in lay-bys and industrial estates. And so they've been around a very long while. Now all I'm going to do is fairly quickly just trim the excess sprue bits off there with a knife. Nothing too sophisticated, and that looks like that's pretty. Those bits look like they're pretty much ready to go. If I want a little bit more smoothing, I've got some Humbrol smooth sanding sticks. There we go. That's the Humbrol. That's that ready to go. So we have a floor. We'll have the roof later because we'll fit that last. Some rather attractively green painted sides. That's the one of those is the shelf, one of those is the sign for the front. We've got a tea urn, most importantly, and we've got a little chimney because obviously they have to have some way of heating stuff in there. So let's start. First things first, I'm not going to try and strip the paint off these. Quite frankly, life's too short, and they only cost me £1, and I'll probably use more in paint stripper than I will if I spent on the kit. But I do want to try and make sure that the worst of the paint is off the join lines. Now, interesting point with any plastic kit is to work out which way round the joins go. Do the corners go inside like that, or rather inside like that? That's actually the back wall, isn't it? This is why you check the things. Do they go inside like that, or do they go outside like that? And we can answer that, I think, by checking the length of the floor. The length of the floor is the same size as the length of the back, so I think it's probably reasonable to say that these sides go outside the back, which means there's going to be glue along there, and that means I better just scrape the worst of that off. Just using a Swan Morton scalpel here, quickly flicking the paint off. And since that's the front, and that's going to be the same, off we go with the paint there as well. And there we go. Give it a little bit of a rub with a sanding stick. I don't want to rub too much because I want to keep these these edges nice and square, and if you sand too much you're very likely to sand the end at a funny angle, and that will be just bad news. Okay, there we are. That was fairly quick. All I'm going to need now is some glue, and I'm using precision plastic glue from Deluxe Materials. I'm using it because it has a nice shaped bottle and a pointy, a long thin pointy tube, so I get a nice accurate bead of glue. Gently squeeze it. There we go, nice accurate bead of glue, not gallons of stuff like you used to get when you were building your Airfix Spitfire with tube glues. And there we have it. So that's the first joint. I'll just hold that for a moment while it dries. Handily, they can. It looks like we can sit these on top of the axles. Let's just double check that. Yep, there's enough space so they can sit on top of the axles. Right, so that's my glue. Hold that for a minute. Quite like the shape of the bottle because it sits there and holds the glue nozzle upwards, and it means the glue runs back down inside the bottle rather than gumming up the nozzle. Of course, you may prefer to use a liquid glue, and this is I know this looks like a very old bottle. It is a very old bottle. It's my old bottle of liquid poly, but Humbrol liquid poly that I have to confess I top it up regularly with Slater's Mech Pack. So the bottle is probably 20 years old, but it's a good shape and it won't fall over, and the brush seems to be lasting. So there we go, a bit of Mech Pack in there, and I buy the Mech Pack in big bottles and decant it into the little one. And there we go, the basic shell built up. Now you might query why I'm using the two types of glue. There is a good reason for this. The precision poly will do the job quite happily on its own, and to be fair, the liquid poly will quite happily do the job on its own. But the clever thing is, use the precision poly on the joint to start with, and what you end up with is a joint that's held together because the glue is strong enough to grab it. And then once you've lined it all up, put a bit of the liquid glue down there. It will thin the precision poly and set the joint almost instantly, so that you're not hanging around waiting for things. But there we are, basic shell built, and I can now look at that. I'm not going to put the roof on for a minute because there's a little bit more work to do. As you can see, the gloss green paint is not pretty, so just say no to gloss paint, kids, because it looks a lot more realistic with matte, but we'll fix that later on. We now come on to these two pieces here. Now one of these, according to the instructions, is the countertop. It's that one there, and one of them is for the sign. But which one's which? Well, handily, one thing that Wills often do is they use their packing as part of the kit. Quite often you'll find that the bubble there is used for glazing, and if it's not, it's quite handy. Save it. It's a really nice flat clear piece of plastic, but quite often they'll use that for glazing, so you have to be careful not to damage it. On this kit we've got a back wall with some detail and a sign, and if I compare the two pieces, the sign is this top one here is wide enough for the sign, and that means, I would guess, since the other one is too narrow, that must make it the counter. Now what I'm doing here is I've put the plastic glue, the liquid glue in, and I'm just squeezing the sides very, very slightly, because what the glue is doing is it's making the plastic very, very slightly soft. So if I squeeze the sides, pull the hair out that's fallen in there, I can't afford to lose any of those. Squeeze the sides slightly. What you're doing is you're squeezing the two softened plastics together. Hold it there. Once they dry, then they will really form a good strong bond. But you just have to put a little bit of pressure so the soft plastics mush into each other. That's a technical term, and they will grab properly. But as you can see, there we are. That's grabbed rather nicely, which just leaves me the canopy to fit, and that slots in there. bit of glue. Don't be too careful with the glue doing this, because once I put the liquid solvent in, any excess glue will be washed away. So there we go. In you go. Slight tilt down so that the rain runs off you when you're waiting for your cup of tea. Keep your fingers out. One important thing: keep your fingers out of the solvent, because otherwise you will leave fingerprints on your plastic model. Trust me, I have been there. It's very, very frustrating. But there we go. I'm going to tilt that up a little bit. Just leave it to dry like that. And you know what? I think we are ready for paint. Right, construction complete. It's time for paint. Now, for speed, I'm using Humbrol acrylics, because they dry faster than the enamels, and I happen to have the colours handy. Now, I've already done the inside with number 28, which is a sort of pale grey cream. Don't tend to use a lot of white on models because it looks a little bit stark, but I prefer a sort of pale grey. So in enamels I use 147, and here 28 will do the job very nicely. These are Humbrol's Generation 2 acrylics, which means they come in a little bottle that you have to decant into something plastic to use as a palette. This seems to be a popular thing with plastic modelers, who seem to do an awful lot of this sort of thing rather than using it straight from the pot. And I guess that the guys from Humbrol looked at it and said, right, fair enough. For all those people who are building our plastic kits, we better give them the sort of paint they want. Now, I'm going to take a risk that I can paint straight onto the gloss that's already on there, and it seems to be going okay. I'm kind of thinking I might need a couple of coats, although to be fair, the coverage on this is looking pretty good already. And I'm not looking for perfection, because these sort of places wouldn't be absolutely perfect. In fact, I think I'm going to have to do a little bit of weathering later on. But you know what, I'm quite happy with the coverage of that already. So I'll go on and finish the rest of the outside. Base coat on, it's all looking a little bit, well, plain. It's a very nicely newly painted hut, but I think we need a little bit more colour in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush the colour with a lighter version of the body colour. So there you are. I should put a little bit of the pale grey into my green. Give it a good stir. Give it a good stir, and then using a softer brush, let's get a bit of kitchen towel, larger tatty brush. I'm going to just dry brush it up and down, a bit heavy there, like that with my finger, that'll get the worst of it off. Dry brush it up and down with a bit of that. That looks a bit bright at the moment, but I think that'll blend in quite nicely. Again, less is more when you're dry brushing. And I say in this situation, a bit much there. Just wipe it away with my finger. There we go. And around the other end. Really, really quick job this. I think the dark dirt's going to come from weathering powders, and I've got the Humbrol aging pack here, which has got some really nice colours, a sort of dark brown, mid brown. These are all rust colours, a black, a dark grey, and another dark brown. Little pots as well. Now, weathering powders, very, very messy. This is why I'm using an old magazine cover rather than working on my modelling board, because it does half mess up. I can throw this away basically. I'm never going to be able to clean that modelling board off properly. So let's pick some colours. I think I quite like the look of, that's a bit dark, that colour, but if we go for a grey and a couple of browns, and then all I'm going to do is pick up a little bit of colour and brush it onto the model. Now, because I'm working fairly quickly, the model is very slightly tacky. Really not a lot in there. If I was doing enamel paints, it'd be much tackier, but acrylics are quite good for this, that they will dry really fast. As you can see, working up and down on the model, just as though there was some rain. It's a little bit random. I'm mixing the stuff on the modelling board, on the magazine cover, on the modelling board, or whatever you want to call it, and just trying to add a little bit more colour there. And you notice I start on the back because you can't see that. You're not going to be able to see that when it's on the model. So now I can move on to the side. I'm happier with the results. Now that's gone on a little heavy. Lick my finger, drag it down, and there you go. It's now just sitting in the planks, which is absolutely fine. Finishing touches are the inside decoration and the sign for the top of the board. Now these are cut out of the packaging, and I'm just checking this. It's quite a thick bit of cardboard, this one, so what I'm going to do is just colour in the edges with a grey pen. Again, don't like using black on this sort of thing because it's really quite stark and it stands out on the model. Grey tends to blend in better. And there we go, just ready to go. Glue wise, for sticking card to plastic, I usually just use an all-purpose clear glue. Try not to use gallons of it on the back, although that's not always that easy. Smear it around with your finger and then wipe your finger off somewhere else. You'll notice I do use my fingers an awful lot in the modelling. There we go. Okay, there's Joe's sign. You could of course make your own one up on the computer, but of course when these things were done in 1979, computers with colour printers were a bit of a rarity. Right, it's looking rather nice already. Right, all I've got to do is go and find the roof, put that on, and then we're nearly ready to plant this thing on a layout. There we have it, roof on. Just one finishing touch to do, and that is the all-important T-urn, without which no self-respecting British factory can operate, and that just sits on the end of the counter. And there we have it, ready for the layout. Well, I'm not sure the guys in the engine shed are going to appreciate somebody setting up a cabin outside their window, but I bet they'll enjoy a nice cup of tea.